Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're exploring spiritual transformation and service. And our guide for this journey is Kelly Rivera's book, Journey to the Heart of the Maker. Now, before you think, oh no, not another book on spirituality, this one's a little different. Rivera isn't your typical self-help guru. She's a visual artist and a performer. But somehow she ended up in a school for spiritual development.
And what's really fascinating is that this school, it was led by a teacher named E.J. Gold. He had a very unique approach to spiritual growth. He really pushed his students to confront themselves and to confront reality in ways they never expected.
So in this deep dive, we'll explore the core insights, the practices from both Rivera's experiences and E.J. Gold's teachings. Hopefully we'll be able to pull out some golden nuggets that you can apply to your own journey of self-discovery.
We're going to be talking about some really interesting concepts.
Yeah.
Like reversing the reality pump, the idea of dying before you die, and even working with an entity called Chief Feature.
I know, it sounds a little out there, but stick with us. It's definitely worth the deep dive.
Absolutely. One of the first things that really struck me about Rivera's journey is this idea that a spiritual path isn't, well, it's not a straight line.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's more like navigating a labyrinth.
Yeah.
Full of unexpected twists, turns, dead ends even.
Okay, I can see that. So how do we even gauge our progress on this winding path?
Well, Rivera uses this analogy, and I love this. She says, the path goes to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love.
I like that.
So it's not about reaching a specific goal.
We're checking off boxes.
Right. It's about how close are we to embodying that genuine love and compassion.
Right. How close are we to actually embodying that? Okay, so then how do we measure that progress? What are some tangible signs, that we're moving towards that city of brotherly love?
Well, one way is through what E.J. Gold calls objective assessment. And it's about seeing ourselves clearly without those filters, of our ego or our defenses. And one of the key ways this happens is through what he calls school conditions, those interactions with others that can really act as a mirror. Reflecting back our unconscious patterns, our blind spots. Right?
No, that's so true. So those moments in maybe a group setting or something where you kind of catch a glimpse of yourself reacting in a way that maybe isn't so loving or compassionate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those moments can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But, they offer valuable insights into our habitual patterns. And this is where this concept of moments of freedom comes in. Gold believed that these moments occur naturally, every 30 seconds or so, like little windows of opportunity to interrupt those ingrained patterns and make a different choice.
So it's like instead of being swept away by those habitual reactions, we can learn to pause, become aware, and then choose a more conscious response.
Exactly.
That's pretty empowering. But how do we learn to actually recognize and utilize those moments of freedom? I mean, they seem so fleeting.
Well, it starts with cultivating presence, paying attention to our inner state, without judgment, just noticing.
Right.
Think of it like training a muscle.
I see.
The more we practice, the more we observe our thoughts, feelings, sensations, the more easily we'll be able to recognize those moments of choice. And even if you catch one, for just a split second, you can use that moment to just take a breath, to shift your attention, or to simply choose a different course of action.
So it's like a micro practice within every moment.
It is.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this human biological machine, this HBM.
Yes.
What is that all about?
Okay, this is classic E.J. Gold.
Yeah.
He saw the human body not just as a physical entity, but as an electrical entity, capable of transformation.
Okay.
And he described this HBM as a reality pump, constantly converting finer energy into denser matter.
So we're not just these physical beings, but also these energetic beings, constantly interacting with.
And shaping reality.
Okay.
So that's a pretty profound concept. But I'm a little confused about this reality pump. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. Think of it this way. The HBM, it's like the operating system of your physical and energetic being.
I see.
And it's constantly converting energy, taking in subtle energies, and transforming them into that denser matter that makes up our physical world.
So we're literally contributing to the solidification of reality through this process.
Yeah, we are.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But if this is happening all the time, how do we become more conscious of it?
Well, that's the key. Spiritual work, in Gold's view, is about reversing that pump. It's about becoming aware of that energetic flow and learning to consciously direct it.
Okay.
It's about taking that dense matter, those experiences, sensations, and transforming them back into finer energy to nourish what he calls higher bodies of spirit.
So we're talking about a real alchemy here.
We are.
A transformation of energy from one level to another.
Exactly.
That's a lot to take in.
It is.
Now, Rivera mentions this interesting anecdote about singing flat during a spiritual experience.
Right.
What's that all about?
It's a great example of how the HBM can operate independently of our conscious awareness.
Okay.
Rivera describes this moment where she's having this blissful experience, feeling deeply connected. But then she starts to sing, and she realizes she's completely off key.
Wow.
It was like her physical body, her HBM, was still running its own program, separate from that blissful state she was experiencing in her higher bodies.
So it's like we can be having this, amazing spiritual experience, but our physical body might not be fully aligned with that state.
Exactly.
And it highlights this importance of observation, of really paying attention to what's happening within us on all levels. What are some other ways we can become more aware of this interplay between our HBM and our higher bodies?
Well, one way is by paying attention to our chemical states.
Mm-hmm.
Gold believed that the balance of serotonin and melatonin was crucial for achieving what he called the waking state of the HBM. So by observing, our energy levels, our sleep patterns, even our moods, we can get valuable feedback on our internal environment. It's like becoming a scientist of our own being.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. We're not just trying to have these fleeting spiritual experiences, but to really integrate those experiences into our daily lives, to become more conscious of our energy and how it shapes our reality. But this brings up a bigger question. What skills do we actually need to develop to actually serve a greater good in the world? If we're all caught up in our own HBM and our, personal transformations, how do we step beyond ourselves and make a real difference?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of personal transformation. But what good is all this inner work if it doesn't actually translate into something meaningful in the world?
Exactly.
You're hitting on a crucial point here. E.J. Gold believed that true spiritual growth, it wasn't just about personal enlightenment. It was about developing the capacity to serve something greater than ourselves.
I like that. So what kind of skills then are we talking about?
Well, he emphasized what he called internal skills, things like attention, will, and presence.
Okay.
And he believed that these inner qualities, they were the foundation for effective action in the world. It's like, building a strong core before you try to lift those heavy weights.
So it's not so much about those external achievements or actions, but about cultivating those inner resources.
Exactly.
That allow us to show up, more fully, more authentically in the world.
Yes. It's about being rather than doing.
Being rather than doing. I like that. Okay.
And one of the techniques they used to develop these skills was something called as if.
As if. Okay.
It's a way of using your imagination to embody those desired states.
Right.
To act as if you already possess those qualities you're trying to cultivate.
So instead of waiting for some magical transformation to happen, we can start acting as if we're already patient or compassionate or courageous.
Exactly.
And that will actually help us to become those things.
Yeah, it's not just about mimicking behaviors.
Right.
It's about shifting our relationship to the HBM, consciously directing our energy towards those qualities we want to embody.
Okay.
And Rivera, she shares her experience working on this play, Creation Story, verbatim.
Okay.
Which was a central part of her training at the school. And she describes how the repetition of the performance, often under very challenging conditions, forced her to hollow out internally, to let go of her personal agenda.
I see.
And become more receptive to something larger.
So it sounds like this hollowing out process, it was about creating space for something new to emerge, like becoming an empty vessel.
Right.
That could then be filled by a higher force. But how does that translate into serving others?
It's about cultivating that capacity to be present and responsive to the needs of the moment.
Okay.
Without imposing your own ego or your desires.
Right.
Rivera talks about the importance of impartiality and this idea of active passivity.
Active passivity, that sounds like a paradox.
It does.
Yeah.
Right. But it's really about being fully engaged in the present moment without forcing anything.
Okay.
It's about listening deeply, observing carefully, and responding with sensitivity and skill.
So it's like this dance, this delicate balance
It is.
between being present and responsive, but also letting go of control, trusting that the right actions will emerge organically from that state of presence.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also sounds incredibly challenging, especially when we're faced with those difficult
situations
For
or
sure.
those challenging people.
Oh, yeah.
How do we handle those moments when our buttons are being pushed and our habitual reactions are triggered?
That's where all this inner work really comes into play. Gold introduced this concept of a completed being,
Completed being.
someone who can tolerate negativity without reacting or retaliating.
Wow.
It's a high bar,
It is.
but it gives us something to aspire to.
So it's not about becoming emotionless or suppressing our feelings, but about developing the capacity to hold those challenging emotions.
Yes.
Without being overwhelmed by them, to respond from a place of wisdom and compassion rather than that reactivity.
Exactly.
But how do we actually cultivate that kind of resilience?
Right.
It's easy to say don't react, but it's a whole other thing to actually do it in the heat of the moment.
One key is working with that HBM, learning to stabilize those lines of tension within us.
Lines of tension.
Gold believed that these lines of tension, they were like energetic pathways that could get overloaded with negative energy, leading to that reactivity and imbalance.
Right.
By learning to work with these lines to consciously direct our energy, we can increase our capacity to handle those challenging situations without getting thrown off balance.
So it's like strengthening our energetic core.
Yes.
Building up our resilience so we can withstand those emotional storms without getting swept away. But how do we even begin to work with these lines of tension?
Well, it starts with becoming aware of our own patterns, noticing what triggers us, what pushes our buttons. And Rivera shares this fascinating anecdote about learning to respond to her and-time.
Her and-time.
Which was this force of opposition within her with compassion.
Wait, compassion for the thing that's causing you trouble.
I know, right?
That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but it speaks to the transformative power of this approach.
Yeah.
She found that when she met her and-time with compassion, it seemed to shift their whole dynamic.
Interesting.
It's like she was taking away its power by refusing to engage in that usual struggle.
That's so insightful. And it reminds me of that saying, what you resist persists.
Yes.
By accepting those challenging aspects of ourselves, even embracing them with compassion, we can actually transform them.
Exactly.
It's like we're integrating those shadow parts of ourselves rather than fighting against them.
Yes, you're getting it. And this leads us to another fascinating concept that E.J. Gold introduces. Chief feature.
Chief feature. Okay.
Think of it like a psychic parasite, feeding off our negative energy and keeping us trapped in those habitual patterns.
Okay, now you're really piquing my curiosity.
Yeah.
What exactly is this chief feature, and how does it relate to our spiritual growth?
Well, Gold believed that chief feature is formed early in life,
Okay.
often as a result of unmet needs or unresolved traumas.
Right.
Like this collection of unfulfilled desires and impulses that drive our behavior from behind the scenes.
Wow.
And the really intriguing part is that it can actually manifest as an astral body.
An astral body.
A subtle energy form that exists alongside our physical body.
That sounds a little bit like something out of a science fiction movie.
It does, right?
Yeah, but I'm also starting to see how this connects to the idea of spiritual schizophrenia.
Yes.
We're often at war with ourselves, feeding the very things that keep us trapped in that negativity and suffering.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that understanding these dynamics can empower us to make more conscious choices about what we feed, what we give our attention to. We can shift that energy away from chief feature.
Right.
And towards our own spiritual growth, towards cultivating those qualities of love, compassion, and service that we've been talking about.
So it's like this battle for our attention.
It is.
What are we going to focus on? The negativity that drags us down or that possibility of transformation? But this brings up another question.
Yeah.
How do we deal with the feel that often arises when we start to wake up to these deeper realities?
Yeah.
It seems like a natural part of the process.
It is.
But it can also be really challenging to navigate.
It makes sense, right? I mean, confronting these deeper levels of ourselves, it would bring up fear.
Yeah.
It's like you're venturing into uncharted territory, facing the unknown.
So what insights does Rivera offer about how to navigate that fear?
Well, she points out that, this fear, it's a natural part of the awakening process.
Right.
It's like as we start to peel back those layers of conditioning, right? Those comfortable illusions that we've built around ourselves.
Yeah.
It can feel really destabilizing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, like we're stepping out of the shadows and into the light.
Right.
And that can be blinding at first.
I can see that. And what about those defense mechanisms we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Things like anger, procrastination, addiction.
Exactly.
Are those ways of avoiding this this fear of the waking state?
Absolutely. Those chronic defense mechanisms, they're often ways of, numbing ourselves,
Right, yeah.
avoiding that vulnerability and uncertainty. That comes with true awakening.
So it's like we'd rather cling to the familiar, even if it's darkness,
Yeah.
than face the unknown light.
Right.
So how do we move through that fear? How do we embrace the unknown without getting overwhelmed by it?
Rivera talks about the importance of simply observing our fear reactions
Okay.
without judgment.
Right.
It's like becoming this curious observer of your own internal experience.
Okay.
Just noticing, how does fear manifest in your body, in
Yeah.
your thoughts, in your behavior.
So it's about becoming aware of those fear patterns.
Right.
Without getting caught up in them,
Yeah.
without letting them dictate our actions. That sounds like a powerful practice.
It is.
But I imagine it takes a lot of courage to face those deep-seated fears.
It does. And Rivera uses this wonderful analogy of learning to skateboard.
Okay.
She describes how she was terrified at first, constantly falling, hurting herself,
Yeah.
but she kept getting back up, gradually overcoming her fear through that repeated exposure and a willingness to embrace the discomfort.
That's a great analogy. It's like, we have to be willing to fall down and get back up again, to face those fears, head on if we want to truly grow. But, this whole journey of self-discovery and transformation, it's not just about us, is it? It's about, finding our place in the larger scheme of things, discovering our unique way of contributing to the world. Rivera and Gold talk about this idea of repaying our debt to nature. What exactly do they mean by that?
They're pointing to this idea that we've been given this incredible gift, right? Life. And that we have a responsibility to give back, to nourish something larger than ourselves.
So it's about shifting from this self-centered perspective to a more holistic view.
Exactly.
Understanding that our actions have consequences and that we have a role to play in this evolution of consciousness. But what does this repayment actually look like?
It can take many forms.
Yeah.
It could be through our work, our relationships,
Right.
our creative expressions, even just the way we live our lives.
Yeah.
The key is to align ourselves with that sense of service, to find those actions that feel, meaningful and aligned with our unique gifts and passions.
And how does this idea of repaying our debt relate to the transformation of the HBM we were talking about earlier?
It's all interconnected. Remember that idea of reversing the reality pump?
Yeah.
Instead of just solidifying reality, we can use that energy to nourish those higher levels of being,
Okay.
to create more beauty, more harmony, more love in the world.
So it's like we're taking those raw materials of our experiences, those denser energies, and refining them into something more precious.
Right.
Something that can actually contribute to the evolution of consciousness.
Exactly. And this is where this concept of developing higher being bodies comes into play.
Higher being bodies.
That's about refining and transforming our emotional, mental, and spiritual capacities.
Right.
Expanding our awareness, becoming more aligned with our true nature.
So it's like we're not just, these physical beings,
Right.
but we're also these multidimensional beings with the potential to evolve on many levels. And as we evolve, as we refine those energies, we naturally start to radiate that outward, contributing to the upliftment of the world around us. That's a beautiful vision, but I gotta admit, that all sounds a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be.
Where do we even begin?
It starts with those practices
Yeah.
that we've been discussing. Cultivating presence, working with the HBM, understanding our chief feature, facing our fears, aligning ourselves with that sense of service.
Right.
It's a lifelong journey, and there's no one right way to do it.
Right.
The key is to find those practices that resonate with you, that help you connect with your own inner wisdom,
Yeah.
and to live a more conscious, meaningful life.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Rivera's journey and E.J. Gould's teachings.
Right.
But it's definitely sparked a lot of new ideas and insights for me. What about you, listener?
Yeah, I'm curious. What has stood out to you the most in our exploration of Journey to the Heart of the Maker?
Yeah, what resonated?
Maybe it's that concept of moments of freedom.
Yeah.
And the possibility of interrupting those habitual patterns. Or maybe it's the idea of chief feature, and the challenge of facing those shadow aspects of ourselves.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I encourage you to take these ideas and experiment with them in your own life.
Yeah, play with it a little bit.
See what happens.
Exactly.
When you start to pay attention to your HBM, to cultivate those internal skills of attention and presence, to align yourself with that sense of service to something larger than yourself.
This deep dive has been a powerful reminder that spiritual transformation, it's not just about, personal enlightenment,
Right.
but about becoming more loving, more compassionate, more engaged human beings.
Yes.
It's about finding our unique way of contributing to the world.
Exactly.
Of repaying that debt to nature through acts of service, creativity, and simply by showing up as our best selves.
And remember, this journey, it's not about perfection.
Right.
It's about progress.
Right.
It's about taking those small steps each day, those moments of choice, and using them to create a more beautiful, more meaningful life for ourselves and for the world around us.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the heart of the maker. We hope you'll continue to explore these ideas and to find your own path of transformation and service.